My parents both are very creative people, and so we grew up with creativity in our family. So whether it was artwork or whether it was singing or doing presentations in front of people, those sorts of things, those were all family activities that took place on a regular basis. And so we were never told that, nope, you can't do that sort of thing. My dad, interestingly, he was an engineer, and an automotive engineer specifically, and had very good skill with drawing and, of course, mechanical drafting. And I always thought mechanical drafting was just like the nth thing, to be able to sit at a drafting table and use pen and ink and pencil and paper and draw out plans for things that you dream up. And then perhaps from those plans you can make something a reality. My mother, more the visual artist, she has always been involved with artwork that tends to be more mural size. She likes to work big, and therefore also was involved with a lot of theater productions, working with sets and costuming. As kids, all of us were involved in 4-H, and that's where I found my love of nature as well. I was a really avid bug collector, weed collector, you name it. In addition to that, my dad loved to do woodworking, and that was his hobby. And as a small child, I would be in the shop with him, just itching to use the table saw or anything. And so I learned to do things from both of my mom and my dad because of the sorts of things they worked on, and they always were very willing to let us participate. Well, when I finally got into college, I wasn't quite sure just what I wanted to major in for sure. And so, as a freshman, you kind of go in, and I was a small town kid. I grew up in Lake Crystal, which is 60 miles or 50 miles to the northwest of here. And as a small town kid, you go to the state college, and suddenly there are like all these classes you can take, so many opportunities. Like, God, there's a history class on pirates. I've always loved pirates. I always wanted to be one. So you start taking all of these classes. And I was trying to formulate just what it was I wanted to really major in. And after the first year, I finally got myself into the area of parks and recreation. There I found that I could kind of tailor my program to incorporate my interest in nature and also pair it with the skills I had learned in terms of drafting. And so I wanted to concentrate on park design and resource management. As I was going through that process, I suddenly discovered geography. Now, in high school, if somebody would have told me I was going to end up being a geographer, I would have said, yeah, right. Boring, boring, boring. Well, I discovered a fascinating end of geography, which is cartography. Cartography is the art and science of making maps. Well, of course, I figured that would be very useful for me to learn more graphic techniques and how a geographer would approach that, especially if I was going to concentrate on park design and resource management. Well, as time went on, I just kind of kept progressing and ended up getting a master's degree in geography and ended up teaching at Minnesota State University for many years. While I was in college, at the same time, busy studying and all of that, but I still wanted to have some other creative things that I could do when I didn't have homework to do and things. And I figured it was time I should purchase my own sewing machine. If nothing else, so that I can, mend jeans, shorten hems, and do those sorts of things. But heaven forbid would I never make clothing, because I'll never wear it. Well, I ended up getting the sewing machine, and I thought, I really should have a project to work on. And so I thought to myself, of all the different things I've worked on, one thing I've never really spent a lot of time with is working with fabric. And I thought, well, if I'm not going to make clothes, the other thing though that intrigued me was, how about if I build a quilt? Now, rather than make a quilt, build a quilt, that must be a carpenter mentality. I thought, okay, at the time, this would have been like late 70s or so, I suppose, or early 80s. You couldn't find a book on quilts hardly anywhere. These days they have all these quilt shops, they have books all over the place on every kind of pattern and technique you can imagine, and fabrics galore, and quilting clubs to help you learn processes. And I've always been one who loves to learn processes, and most of the time I like to learn them myself. And then when I run into a snag, though, I like to know of someone I can talk to who can help explain to me what I need to do. Well, I was kind of on my own at that point. I finally went to my favorite publishing company, which is Dover Publishing, because they publish a myriad of books on every subject under the sun that might be very obscure, things that have been out of print for years, and they reintroduce them. And I found one book on quilt patterns, so I ordered it. And I open it up, and there are 101 quilt patterns. And I thought, well, for my first quilt, I probably should pick some traditional quilt patterns so I can work myself through, cutting, piecing, sewing, assembling, and finally quilting and such. So I'm flipping through this book, and I'm flipping through, and finally I said, this might be the only quilt you ever make. So pick the one you like the most. Well, I kept coming back to this one in particular. Now, the one I picked, I had to have been totally ignorant, because it's like, what was I thinking? I picked one called the Lone Star. Anyone who's a quilter has heard of a Lone Star. If you're not a quilter, let me describe it. It's a big 8-pointed star, and each point that comes out is basically, you've got 8 big diamonds. And within that, each diamond section, there are, depending on the complexity, I must have picked the most elaborate one, 120 little diamonds have to all be pieced together to create one diamond, multiplied times 8, and you come up with, 600 and who knows how many, or 900 and who knows how many little diamonds that I had to piece together to create this big star. Now you have to realize I'm kind of a beginning quilter here. Duh! Well, I'm one of these people that when I start something, I will finish it. And so I had started on it. And I'd work on it a little bit, and then I would put it away. And then I'd work on it a little bit. Well, anyway, it took me 4 years, but I finally got it done. It ended up being a queen-sized bedspread with this huge diamond on it. The piecing part took quite some time, but then I had to come to the hand quilting element. And I didn't have a clue, really, how I was supposed to approach this. Luckily, I had a neighbor lady who was just getting into quilting, so she could give me some advice. I was going to hand quilt this. And with a quilt, you're going to have your layers of a backing sandwiched with the front. In the middle, there is a batting. And you want to quilt through those layers to bind it all together. I figured this would probably be the worst part of the whole quilt. I really did. I thought, I've hemmed slacks before by hand, and I hated it. It's like, give me a sewing machine any day. But after giving me some advice and laying it out, and I got an embroidery hoop on a stand so I could just sit right up here and quilt away, I realized that it was one of the most relaxing activities. And it's one of those kinds of activities that also allows me to keep my hands busy and let my mind and daydreamy state go off over here, and that's where I come up with all my ideas. I love activities like that when I need to come up with ideas. I need to relax, allow my mind to get into this zone, and the ideas start flowing. quilting is a process that will do it. So as I was quilting this very first quilt, I already had new ideas in mind. As a cartographer, I immediately went, wooden contour lines just look cool on fabric. Watching these lines flow across the surface. And I didn't even really care whether a person understood what the contours represented in terms of a landscape. I was more intrigued with just how those lines would flow across the surface and how they would make the person's eye move across the surface. So after my one big quilt, I swore, one, I would never make a quilt that big again, and two, I would start creating original pieces. And so I have taken my skills as a cartographer and these days create more wall-hanging sized quilted maps that represent nowhere in particular most of the time, and also incorporate some of the elements that a cartographer would include on a map, such as what is the scale of this piece. I might exaggerate it by putting a great big bar scale at the bottom of my piece. Some sense of direction, where I might use a little triangle to give you that idea of, say, north at the top, and black line work giving me some borders. So the art quilts are what I'm mainly doing now, and I exhibit galleries kind of regionally. And in addition to that, because of my love of nature and woodworking, and the good fortune of living on a farm with a beautiful old grove, I've been building furniture out of things I harvest from the grove, as well as salvaged materials, and then adding other natural elements to the pieces and integrating them.
You have a lot of interests.
Yes, I do, and life is too short.
So, what is it with maps that catches you?
You know, even as a kid, and I would think a number of people could say this, maps have always been intriguing to me because even as a kid reading, say, a book, Treasure Island, and there's this map in the book, and you're thinking, this might lead me to some place, and it's got to be a special place. There might be a treasure there. I'm one of these people who's very spatial, so I like to visualize a big picture and be able to zoom in on it, and maps can do that for you. A map can represent a space or area in reality. It is shrunk down into model form, and you can fold it up and stick it in your glove box or whatever, but I always think of them as precious documents that open the key to somewhere, to take you somewhere where you want to go. So I've just been intrigued with that idea. And then also because I was trained in pen and ink cartography, I had that lovely opportunity to work on a drafting table with pen and ink, and that tactile feel of working with the paper and the pen, just as with the quilted fabric now, and how tactile that is. When cartography moved into the digital age, I kind of went, that's not my thing. It's too remote. It doesn't provide, I think maps become too generic. Oftentimes you don't get the full picture. They only show you this and tell you where to go to get there. So when that happened, I started to pursue my quilted maps in more earnest terms, because that was a way for me to be way more expressive about what a cartographer does and how they can throw in a lot of creativity in the process of creating a document. Here I look at my pieces as much more fun, whimsical, textural, eye movement, and not so literally as a map, even though they have the appearance of a map.
Furniture has a sort of obvious use, and so what's fun is to have a gadget that's both beautiful and interesting, and you can sit on it and evaluate it on how well you sit on it. Do your quilted pieces, are they intended to have a use as well as a kind of happiness content?
Well, you know, I guess for me, the use of these quilted pieces are not unlike a painting or drawing that you hang on the wall. And they are not just a home decor sort of a thing, but are they the sort of thing that you look at and you ponder and you see new things in it every time you look at the piece? Does it make me smile? Does it make me consider how that lay of the land might be today to me, and another day my mood might be different, and I'll look at those lines and maybe I'll find them disturbing. Things that I hang on my walls anyway are original artworks by myself and friends of mine. I appreciate them because I know those people. I usually know them very, very well. And to spend time with them is like, with the pieces, is like spending time with them. And I discover new things in those pieces. So they do have utility to me. They aren't literally like a chair that you sit on, of course. But then I look at the kinds of chairs I make, and I consider them something you want to just look at and view on the one hand, or to sit in them and go, Shelley sat here. I don't care. It's you know, it's an engaging sort of thing with artwork and me. I like to engage in the piece. I feel artwork that hangs on the wall has a usefulness to it.
So, a piece of yours that you have that's hanging, say, in Dave Strom's house is telling him something about you.
Oh yes,
in a
definitely.
Kind of ongoing way.
And I have some of his work as well, and he's telling me things all the time. You know, yes.
Can you give us just a little idea of kind of the direction or the topics of the messages that your pieces are kind of sending out? Sort of a hint about the language for people who might not initially get on the wavelength.
Well, I think, first of all, anyone's artwork is very personal. So when you view someone's artwork, someone who doesn't know you at all can still draw certain conclusions about you because they can see by, first of all, your craftsmanship, your subject matter, how literal or abstract it might be. They can make some inferences about you as a person, the kind of person who would create that sort of work. I also can look at my work and I can definitely see that as a Shelley, because Shelley is, you know, I'm precise. I'm a stickler for precision, and I'm very enamored working with color. Texture and movement are important to me. Nature's important to me, and I do think all of those elements, whether you know me or not, are going to show up in my work, and you'll be able to identify that. My furniture pieces, likewise, you know, they're very organic sorts of pieces, but then you'll see that I find it important to do a very nice finishing job to bring the color up, to make the surfaces smooth, even though they may look a bit rustic. But they'll know for one thing that I love to feel wood. I want people to touch the wood. And if it feels good, it doesn't feel rough, it feels nice. You can feel the little undulations where there might be dings in it or whatever, because that's how the board was. But I want it to feel nice. They're going to know those things about me. You
mentioned along the way you've been a teacher for a while. how does that fit in with this other stuff you're doing?
Well, I taught for 16 years at Minnesota State University in Mankato, mostly part-time, but I've always had a love for teaching. When you have certain things that you are passionate about, you can't wait to tell people about it. And as a teacher, I was very passionate about the subject of geography, and not just particularly cartography, but the whole realm of geography. And it is so fun when you can find a student here and there that can be so inspired by something you have said and encourage them. That's a very rewarding thing. And now that I haven't been teaching for several years, I do sort of miss that. But by the same token, I have other opportunities through my artwork by giving gallery talks, those sorts of things, where I still have that opportunity to share, to still be the person who gets up there and lectures. That's a very important, I think, social thing for me, especially now that I am mostly at home working on projects and things and not getting out as much. The opportunity to get out and present to people what I do and how excited I am about it is just a very enjoyable experience for me.
What's it like to be a geographer living here? I mean, you have geographer thoughts living...
Well, it's interesting because, well, especially as a cartographer, I might be one of the only ones within a 50-mile radius here.
I know two others.
Are there two others?
I've interviewed two other cartographers.
Okay. Within a 50-mile radius?
Within a
well, you'll need to give me their names.
Yeah.
You're going to have to repeat the question. Cause
I know that's mind-blowing. It's just, for some reason, this is a haven for geography refugees here.
Yeah. Well, geography is such a broad subject.
Yeah. But, no, just, living here when this particular confluence of, forces and opportunities, the windmills, the roads, the crops. As a geographer, what kind of geographer thoughts do you have, or how does the world around you hit you when you have your sort of geographer hat on?
Okay, I'm seeing what you're saying there. Well, first of all, we're planted out here in what originally was prairie, and it's very flat land, and it's prime agricultural land, and I'm thinking some people from other places come out to this area and they think, oh, this has got to be the most desolate place to be in the world. They are wrong. As a geographer, I'm very observant of place. And I didn't grow up too far away from here, so it's a similar sort of landscape. But I have this, this really innate, soulful feel for this place. And in geography's terms, we'd call that topophilia, this very sense of place. I've always lived here, and I have learned to become very observant of the minute details of this flat landscape. And its occasional little ravines and this and that and the other, but the casual observer doesn't see the details that I would see, that probably most of us who are in tune with the geography of this area and live here see. We see this area as something of a whole system of complex cycles of life, kinds of habitats. We can probably pick out and name 4 different kinds of wetlands specifically, whereas someone else would just go, well, there's a pothole there. So we observe the details of, in smaller detail, of what we have here. And so we aren't so wowed by the big mountain or the big gorge, but we are wowed with the details that are out here. And along with that, as a geographer, we have to look at the cultural side of it, the people that inhabit this area. And the various personalities, the things that they are employed in, the things we do for entertainment, and all of those things are very much influenced with the physical landscape that we have here. And while some people might think there's not enough to do here and they would be bored, I guarantee you that most of us who grew up around here have learned to make our own fun.
You came from a creative family. I've met quite a number of creative people, sometimes absurdly creative people out here. I know there are creative people in the city too, but is there something about rural Minnesota that promotes maybe a certain sort of creativity or a certain way for it to flourish?
What I have often thought is the fact that I don't live near a metro area. I come up with my ideas without being influenced by what other people are doing. I'm thinking when you have more access and can face-to-face make contact with other like-minded people, various ideas start to meld together, and then you're influenced by all of those things. And out here, if an idea comes to you, there's you're on your own to figure out how you're going to make that work most of the time. I think your ideas perhaps can be more original, and again, if you aren't consulting much with other people, you're kind of working independently, and so again, you aren't necessarily influenced by other artists and what they're doing. It is always nice to be in contact and see what other artists are doing occasionally, but I think having the time to be on your own, figure it out on your own, allows you to be very independent in your thinking, and I think creativity isn't as stifled because of that.
What kind of community do you have with other artists out here?
It's kind of widespread, you know. It's like I have a good friend in the nearby community, my friend David Strum, and he and I, you know, both do quite a bit of artwork and show often, and then there are other folks in the area too who we know that are doing their artwork as well, maybe don't show as often, but we get together probably occasionally because we happen to all be on the same gallery committee that meets about once every 3 months. Otherwise, you have to kind of reach out further, and you know, you kind of meet someone here and there, which leads you to another person here and there. And so we are scattered about, but it's not like we have this close contact with one another all that often because of the distance that we are scattered about.
What's your relation to like major metro areas like the Twin Cities?
From an artistic standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, do you go? Do you have a regular trip to see the galleries, or or do you try to pretend they don't exist? Is there any commerce with, let's say, the art department at the University of Minnesota, or any place where there is a cluster of people thinking about these matters? How does that work?
And I've lived out here 30 years, and when we were first married, and I would say for the first 15 years, we would go up to the Twin Cities a lot. What I would consider a lot. It's 150 miles away, so you know, go up for a weekend occasionally and, you know, visit the Walker Arts Center or go to an arts fair or go to listen to some music, different things like that. And very enjoyable things. But over time, what's kind of happened is we really rarely get to the cities anymore. And I guess there could be a couple of reasons for that. One is when I moved out here, it took me many years to finally get to know the kinds of arty people and this and that who we could get together occasionally and share and knock around ideas, this and that. So I was fulfilling that need mainly up on campus at Mankato State and then up in the cities occasionally. As time goes on and you finally find your niche of people that you want to be around out here, there almost isn't this strong need to go elsewhere to look for, you know, cultural entertainment when you find out that there are certain friends of yours and people that do things around here. So we do tend to stay a little more grounded here. I guess another reason is I really hate driving in the cities anymore. It's awful. It's not fun to drive in the cities. The other thing that disappoints me over the time too is that when we were going up to the cities quite often, I loved going to some of the galleries and things in the Wyman building and those places on First Avenue and in that area. It was kind of an arty enclave. And then, you know, the downtown area has, you know, transitioned over time. You don't have the artist studios there. They're now over in the Northrop King building or elsewhere, and they aren't in the right downtown area because the Target Center went in and so on and so forth. And so, you know, it used to be handy for us. There were a lot of things that you could do in downtown Minneapolis, for example, without, you could park the car, walk everywhere. So the charm of downtown Minneapolis has kind of gone away for me, so we don't really get up there that much anymore.
It's moved to northeast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think in northeast you can walk.
Yeah, but you have to travel over to there and then get in and move around, yes.
Yeah. Has the internet made any big changes in your work, your life? I mean, has it been important to you?
You know, I try to use the internet as little as possible. Of course, it's got its advantages. It's a good way to communicate back and forth when you need to send emails back and forth, but then, you know, if you Google my name, all sorts of things show up, and on the one hand, that is kind of neat, because occasionally someone will get a hold of you and say, well, I happen to see your name on this topic on the internet, and I go, really? I personally, though, don't have a personal website. I can be found on minarts.org that way. So, you know, it has made some changes, but I am not really such a big fan of the internet that I want to have websites or be selling my artwork over the internet or any of that sort of thing, and I don't even use the computer for my graphics and design. I still do it the old-fashioned way with my hands.
So, imagine you're living a considerable extent among farmers here. Although, having found what I found, I don't want to absolutize that, because I'll bet there's an astronaut at one door that way, and somebody who's and possibly an alien plotting the takeover of Earth and the other farms. That I mean, I've met enough things, so I'm not going to generalize, but I'd say there are a fair amount of farmers if you draw a 10-mile circle.
Yep.
So how does an artist get along with a farmer?
Well, I'm married to one. We seem to get along.
Okay.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Probably what, as the neighborhood people got to know me, what they realized was that I'm an incredible carpenter. So I'm immediate friends with every farmer. However, I let it be known that I only do carpentry for myself. I'm not out for hire. My artwork is something that, you know, I'm not sure whether they think one way or the other about it. They just know I'm an artist, and I don't know. Some people seem to think an artist is something exotic, and they leave it at that.
I've heard such optimistic stories. Dave Strom stories is optimistic. Yours is optimistic. There are others of this area as a good place to work, a good place to develop as an artist. I'm curious whether there's any way that the shoe pinches, or any way that you feel like, oh, it could be better, or there are needs that don't get fulfilled.
Okay. Well, you know, when you know a place like this so well, you learn to, you know, take that circumstance as it is. I really don't feel like we aren't being, you know, like, oh, there should be more of this available for us or more of that available for us. It's like, you know, all of us kind of know how to figure out where we want to be with our artwork. And if we don't get the attention of the Twin Cities, that's not the end of the world, because quite frankly, I think there's a wonderful appreciation of people within a region. And as a regional artist, I figure there's a need for me to expose people to the artwork I do, as well as our other regional artists, and I'm quite satisfied with that. So I don't spend time crying in my beer going, oh, well, the cities just ignores us and we'll never get grants from them and la 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 la. I just like, nah, I'm quite comfortable with what I'm doing here, and I don't feel needy, really.
I have a friend who does really beautiful stuff, and it is piled 6 deep along every wall of a very small house. And there must be hundreds of canvases, and canvases that take unbelievable amounts of work each. And well, he wants to be shown, he wants to be seen, but I think a lot of it is he wants to do it. And
right.
Once he's done it, he piles it against the wall and does something else.
Okay.
And he may be on an extreme end of, you know, of maybe having a rather narrow or limited need to be seen. But I'm curious about this, you know, how being seen figures into your work or your ambition, let's say.
For me, it's a sharing process. And for another reason, I pursue gallery exhibits where I can have either be in a small group exhibit or a solo exhibit and fill a gallery space with just my work. For me as an artist, that is an exciting thing for me, because that's an opportunity where I can have a large body of work in a large space and be able to view all of it at one time. And I can't do that at home. I mean, I can't. I'll do a piece here and here, and then I have a few on the wall, and the rest go in storage because, you know, I don't have spaces for that. So it's always revealing to me when I get an exhibit up, and every space is different, but to be able to view, a large number of your pieces all in one space, I learn a lot from that, and it's exciting to be able to see that. Am I being consistent? How has my work changed over time? But the other thing then is to be able to share my passion with other people. And whether I give a gallery talk or not, everything's on display for a period of time, and people are welcome to come and look. I do especially like it when I can also do a gallery talk, because oftentimes it helps explain what I do and the details, and the audience appreciates that, because they go, "Well, I wouldn't have figured that out if you hadn't explained that to me, la 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 la," and then they go back and they look at the pieces again, and then they start seeing things that they weren't quite sure about the first time through. So, it's like with any passion or anything, you just can't wait to show it to people. It's a form of sharing. It's like winning the lottery and, oh God, I gotta call all my relatives because I can't wait to share it with somebody, because you go through all that work and that energy, and you're happy with what the result is, and so you want to share it.
You either have or just had a show at Bethany, right?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
So how did that one go? In terms of working with in terms of the audience and audience response, and how was it a good experience for you?
Oh, it was an excellent experience. First of all, there were a number of students, faculty, as well as general public that showed up, and we had, I would say, almost between 80 and 100 people came, which that was like, wow. I was especially excited about giving a gallery talk there because it's a college, and that opportunity again to share what I do with the students. The students were also there, and some were there as part of an art history class where they had to critique my presentation and my artwork and all of that. So it was a study for them, and I was able to get some feedback from the faculty in terms of the overall what the students and faculty thought about the exhibit. So it was sort of like a critique thing for me, which was neat. The college campus was very accommodating. When you exhibit at a place like that, they've got a lovely space, but they also are very good with publicity. And I ended up having a special presentation I did a week later for a group of women, and they were so gracious about getting everything set up for them so that I could come and give a special presentation to this group of women, and it was a really nice experience. It was the opening exhibit for the season for the students when they got back from whatever they did all summer, and so I thought it was fun to be the first exhibitor for the year. I now have that exhibit over at the Clear Lake Art Center, and it'll be there for another 6 weeks.
I'm glad it's still up someplace. I would like to see it. Now, you've taught cartography, so you've had students in that area, but have you had anything like students in art? Oh, occasionally I used to do some, I haven't done so much in the past, but occasionally if there's a quilters group, for example, that wants to learn a technique, I create templates or stencils, for example, for
things that I want to color or paint on the surface of the fabric, be it, say, a river or a lake or something like that. And if they want to learn that kind of technique in the work they do, I might come over there and bring some materials and demonstrate, and they can dabble. But otherwise, I pretty much just work independently on my work, and it's sometimes hard to teach. When it comes to artistic things, it's easier for me to teach technique types of things versus, how do you teach creativity? I don't know how you do that, quite frankly. You can encourage it. If somebody comes up with a great idea, encourage it and maybe get them off on their own and come up with other accompanying ideas to get them excited. But, to teach creativity, that's a hard thing to teach.
How do your best ideas happen?
Well, oftentimes I will have something in mind, but I haven't formulated it yet. And so my technique for doing that is it's a waste of my time to just sit there and doodle on paper and stuff if I haven't got the idea formulated. And so I go find activities if I'm looking for an idea in particular that I'm trying to find. Usually I just have ideas and I write them down right away that just come to me and I'm not thinking of them. But say it's a particular project and I need to come up with an idea for it. I plant that little seed up here and I let it sit and I don't worry about it. I don't overthink about it. I don't doodle. I don't scratch my brain over it. I just let the seed sit there. And if I need to come up with that idea a little sooner, then it'll just naturally come. I find activities that put me in that relaxed, daydreamy mode. And it's amazing how many times I come up with a solution. Those kinds of activities include hop in the car, zone out, just cruise the roads and zone out. Do some ironing, like a lot of ironing. Paint the house. Do some hand quilting. They're all activities where I am busy. But I don't have to think about what I am doing so much so that I can just be off thinking of other things. And boop, all of a sudden, light bulb over here or a light bulb over here. Just happens.
Now, once you have an idea, is there much transformation or experimentation kind of on the way to its getting realized?
It depends on what it is. I guess when it comes to more of my quilts, since I do them regularly and I kind of really know how to put them together and this and that, there isn't so much of that. If I'm working in a medium that I don't work with often, and I'm thinking I want to incorporate that in something I'm doing, I'll experiment first. I'll dabble and it's like, okay, let's see what effect I would get, experiment with it, let it sit before because if the technique's going to work, that's going to influence how I do the entire piece of work. And if it's not going to work, then I need to come up with a different game plan or just scrap that idea and come up with a whole different idea to begin with. Some things, my quilted pieces are pretty well, I plan them out. I tend to be, though, quite in the opposite realm when I'm doing my furniture pieces because they are just so spontaneous. I'll find an interesting piece of wood out in the grove or an interesting piece of wood that I found in a shed and the wood will say something to me like, oh, I really want to be a chair. And I go, okay, you want to be a chair? Okay. And I go, yep, I think you do want to be a chair. So then from there, I have various materials. The idea is, okay, it'll be a chair, but I really don't know what it's going to look like in the end. I don't know what it'll look like until it's finished. And that is a really fun process, too. So, in a way, that's sort of an experiment process all the way through.
So, what percentage of your time working on your stuff do you figure you're having fun?
I would say all of it.
Okay.
All of it. Unless something isn't going well, but yes, all of it.
What I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, some people go through really hard times with their stuff where they just hate it and they want to quit and it isn't going.
Oh, well, you know, and sometimes you'll have something that just doesn't go well. But, you know, those are, in retrospect, good experiences too, because, you know, you learn from your mistakes and therefore you go, well, okay, that method doesn't work or what have you, so I need to formulate a different way of accomplishing what I want to do. But, you know, I really rarely have many times where that's happened to me. Part of it is I know the materials I'm working with pretty darn well. I have, like, say for my woodworking stuff, I have the tools I need. It's more a matter of figuring out technically how I'm going to make this piece not only look sculptural and everything, but also the technical things that need to be done to make it sturdy and, you know, that sort of thing, and finished properly and those sort of things. But, you know, I can get going on a chair thinking, oh, I got a half an hour, I'll maybe putz with it today. And then as I'm working with it, I get so into it that I've been working on it all day. And I go, well, where did the day go? As long as it's flowing, I'll probably keep at it, you know, that way. If I run into something that's not quite working right, it's best to just put it away, just leave it. Sometimes it's just because I'm tired that day or whatever, and I come back the next day and it works just fine.
Now, some of the artists I've talked to get their marching orders from commissions.
Mm-hmm.
Remember somebody who was commissioned to do the gateway to Hamilton, Ohio.
Okay.
And that gave them a very specific project. He ended up with a 60-foot fish or something.
Yeah,
but
right.
It was like, but it was like, you know, are you? I mean, you're in the situation, if I get you right, of not having particular commissions. Nobody's telling you, asking you for particular things, or providing a general description under which you work. Is that right?
Oh, pretty much so. And, you know, but I have done some quilted pieces for people who personally, they like my work. They like the idea of a map. So then they might ask me, would you be interested in doing something of a particular place? And I will do that sort of thing. But I usually let them know, though, that, you know, okay, here's the idea, and I'll put together a deal, but, you know, I'm going to do it in this style. You're aware of that. La, 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 la. Let me see what kind of thing. And then we can talk about colors later. But they pretty much, you know, they respect my style and what I'm doing. So I have the freedom to create the rest of the piece how I feel it should be done. And then you insert that specific place that, you know, they're attached to, I guess you might say. But I have not been involved in big public art projects. I think that's just the closest thing I had. It did have something through the Percent for Art in Minnesota program where it was Ridgewater College in Wilmer. And anytime there is a new building or renovation happening, a certain percent of the cost of the project is for the acquisition of art. And in most of those cases, they are looking for an installation sort of a piece, specific. But in this case, it was the library edition or something of that sort, and they were just looking for artists' artwork that could be hung down a hallway so that you could just submit something you've already made, and they would select. And so they did do that. So I didn't have to do anything specific in terms of the idea of my quilt. However, because it's a fiber piece and and it's a public place, I was required to have it mounted in a case of some sort to protect the fabric and all of this. So that was a little bit of a hassle for me, but we got it done, and that's the way they want to have it presented in a case like that. Well then, okay.
So you have a kind of freedom that Rembrandt would have killed for. We want to see all the faces.
Yeah.
And mentioning Rembrandt makes me wonder, having come at visual arts from cartography, do you see yourself as having a relationship to the history?
The history of
art? I mean, or did you kind of sneak in by a side door such that you're not sort of in dialogue with Matisse and Chagall and Vermeer?
Oh, well, just because I have a degree in geography doesn't mean I didn't take art classes. I probably took enough art classes to at least have a minor in it. I'm pretty well informed in art history. I'm probably not an expert at it, but I'm aware of the various schools of art and various artists, those sorts of things. Architecture is also something that has been very, very influential to me, and I would have to say that probably the most influential architect is Frank Lloyd Wright's work. And you will probably notice that looking at my home and at my artwork that there's a certain style to it that has a bit of a Wrightian feel to it. I readily will say that.
You seem to be in love with the right angle. The question is kind of not so much do you know the history is. But I think you've kind of answered it. Do you feel yourself in a dialogue with this history in some place in this conversation that has gone on for so long? And your dialogue is Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yep, I would certainly say that.
Are you in the dialogue of furniture making, furniture design?
Well, I don't know what to say about that. All of it is so much of what I'm doing these days is just very organic, and it's just, it would fall into probably an arts and crafts era that probably started that need for me to want to get into more organic because of the arts and crafts, and then how some of that evolved and came together, particularly the great camps of the Adirondacks. Same period of time, and a lot of these folks who might have had craftsman style homes or mansions even in the cities were now going out to their camps in New York, and they would bring in some of their craftsman furniture along with that, but then they also would have built by the local carpenters furniture that's made out of things that were harvested from the forest, and then putting those together. And I very much do that here in my own home.